Blog Talk Radio.
Are you ready to take a bite out of the competition? Are you looking for ideas to make your business better? Welcome to the Core Business Show with Tim Jacquet, sponsored by Apple Capital Group. At the core of every successful business, you'll find people making a difference. And with each episode of the Core Business Show, we talk with those people, examine those ideas, and explore the strategies that make them special. Now, the host of the Core Business Show, Tim Jacquet.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Core Business Show. I'm Tim Jacquet, your host. Today, we have another OCP artist. We're going to talk about his music, his style, and his life and career. Again, his name is Pedro Rubalcava, and he's on the line. We're going to start with a track, and we'll have him on the line shortly. So this one's called Deo Gracias, and once that song is complete, we'll get started with the interview. Well, Pedro, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Tim.
Great. I guess to begin with, tell us about yourself. Our audience loves stories about composers and authors. So kind of tell us how you got started.
Well, I've been playing music and singing for a long time. I think it started as when I was in 8th grade. And back, I used to go to a little country school. It was K through 8 school. And couldn't have been more than 125 students total. It was 2 grades per classrooms. And the teachers for one of the spring programs and asked me if I would sing a solo. The first time I had ever sung a solo, and so they practiced with me. I learned it, and then they asked me to sing a second solo. And then when I graduated and went to high school, I started entering into the choirs and courses at the school in a performance group called the Madrigals, which is kind of like a glee kind of thing. And then, at the same time, I was very involved in our parish singing and playing music with my cousins were in charge at the time of the music ministry, and the interesting thing was that kind of unique thing, and I'm very grateful for, is that in our own house, in our own home, because we lived out in the country, and our home became a mission of the parish for all of the campesinos, all of the farm laborers who couldn't, during certain seasons, because they worked 7 days a week, couldn't make it to church in town on Sunday.
Wow.
And so we had in our living room, we were the parish mission church, and we had a liturgy during the week. Right in our living room, anywhere from 70 to 200 people would show up, depending on what was going on. And that's where I kind of got my beginnings in music ministry. Later, learned how to play music and started developing music for the liturgy there in our home, and which transferred into the parish in town. And at the same time, I began playing in bands in town and Latin dance bands and things like that, but all the while being involved in parish music liturgy. My cousin formed a mariachi. I learned how to play in that. And so it's all these things kind of converged all between the time I was 14 and 16 for the most part.
Wow. So what is it like, actually? You have a rare experience of dealing with a grassroots community in your home that you're ministering to. So you like not have a captive audience, but it's like you don't have like a community you walked into. This is a community you guys created. What is it like to create a community like that and to minister to them?
I guess there's 2 points I'd like to make. One is that I feel very grateful to have had that because it was formative and transformative. I mean, because the pastor would come, and we had different pastors from year to 2 or 3 years. There'd be a change, but very willing to. It was an intimate setting, obviously, very familial, and we always had the support of the pastor, particularly myself, would work with me on a personal level, say, and bring songs, learn these songs, or here's how you do it, and to be able to give me the freedom on a certain level to try new things and to critique them on the spot, say, well, maybe that's not so good lyrically, or maybe that's not so good, maybe that doesn't work, and to get an appreciation for being involved on informal learning, and from an early time begin to read documents. I guess I became a kind of a document geek in some sense, and to try to understand how best to serve. And so I had the luxury of doing it on my own, and to be able to ask questions and inquire about myself and others how best to do this. So that was I think, in a nutshell, the whole experience of coming into contact with quote unquote the official church in an unofficial way, I guess. The other part was that the support of the community itself, who a lot of them were family members, but a lot of them were people that we grew up with out in the country that you had connections with because of the country school and people that you go to. You heard someone die and you go to the wake or the funeral. You heard someone had a party, they invited you and you were all there, and there was always music around that. So it was a development of the community on an intimate level where friendships were deepened, developed, and that fell hand in hand with the community of the church that was forming as a body of Christ, that was nurtured and fed by body and blood of Christ at Mass.
The title song we just played a few minutes ago, Deo Gracias, kind of tells the story of that particular song and how you came up with that song, and how did it come to you? Did it come to you all at one time, or kind of tell us the origins of this particular song itself?
Well, this, from Latin meaning "thanks be to God." I don't know if you're familiar with the text for the Latin Mass, but when we leave, one of the very last things the priest says is, after the Mass is done, he says, which translated means "Go, you are sent." In the English, we have different ways of officially saying it in their own missal text, but the Latin remains the same. And the response is "Deo gratias," thanks be to God. And that has always kind of intrigued me, why the translation isn't more direct. Instead of "the Mass is ended, go in peace" or something like that, it doesn't quite capture that "go, you are sent," that mission. So I was always intrigued by that. I was working in a parish in Escondido, California, St. Mary's, and one of my tasks as director of music, of liturgy and spirituality at the parish was to kind of be able to bring the English-speaking community and Spanish-speaking community to worship together. And this particular instance, they had a history of doing that. The pastor wanted to kind of deepen that experience a little more and go to the next steps, whatever that might be. And so the very first liturgy that I got to work with at that parish was, help plan is the Thanksgiving liturgy. And how do you bring people together who don't have a common repertoire, for instance, who don't have, the choirs don't normally get together, Spanish-speaking choirs, English-speaking choirs, and so how does that work? And so I created this song. The verses are taken from Psalm 145, and the notion of the text is very much filled with giving thanks to God for all these wonders God has done. And this idea of Deo Gratias coming out from that experience of the text from missioning, going out to do this thing, I think it was, for me at the time, it was connected with expressing thanksgiving, not only that we have this gift of being able to celebrate and offer thanks to God during the Eucharistic liturgy, but at the same time, to be able to say, thanks be to God that we have been nurtured, and now we can go out and tell the world that we have experienced Christ in this special way. And so this little ditty came up, Gratias, Alleluia. Anytime you stick Alleluia in there, it just makes it all the more joyful, to me anyways. And that's a Hebrew word in origins, or Aramaic, but Hebrew. And so I say, well, we'll stick the Latin in there, we'll stick the Hebrew in there, and everybody, it's easy enough to sing. People will sing it, and I'll create verses in Spanish and English. And what we ended up doing was actually just to kind of cut down on the amount of songs that we needed to learn for that particular liturgy. We sang it as an entrance song. We sang it, the refrain, as a response to the responsorial psalm, and we chanted other verses to that in English and Spanish. We used it as one of the communion songs, and then we used it again as after the final blessing to go out with. And so it just kind of made things a little simple, little anecdotal thing. I remember on Sunday following, one of the parents of a little child came to me and said, that song I thought was pretty good, but it stuck so much to my family that my kids were singing it all week, and I think I got tired of it, he said. And they would just sing, Deo Gratias, Alleluia. So that's kind of a story in a nutshell.
Wow. So tell us, when it comes to bilingual music today, and you trying to integrate that with the English Mass or bilingual Mass, if you had the top 5 or 10 songs to do, what comes to mind to you outside of Via Pan de Vida, Pescador, I forgot. Any other titles that comes to mind that you recommend, hey, these should be part of your repertoire for your particular parish?
Well, rather than give you titles, I think, if I may, I'm going to just kind of give you a little what I consider basic elements to music for worship in an integrated community like that when you have different languages. And one of them being, you'll recognize that while the Deo Gracias song, for instance, has Spanish and English verses, the refrain is not in Spanish or English. And so one of the things that I have learned over the years in trying to experiment with is to create something that everybody can sing simply regardless of what the language is. And whether that refrain is in Spanish or whether the refrain is in English or whether the refrain is in Latin or another language, that we're able to allow people to participate and not allow them to wait too long before they sing again. So if you have a cantor or cantress who can sing the verses in the different languages, make sure it's a short, sweet verse before they come back and sing again, and allow the people to optimal time to participate. So maybe Deo Gracias would be on that list. Another song that was from that same collection, that because at the parish that we were at the time, St. Mary's, the pastor was very big on celebrating all the Marian feasts. And the liturgical calendar, if you're aware of it or not, I don't know, but there's many Marian feasts. And so anytime there was a Marian feast on the calendar, we would celebrate it and invite the whole community to celebrate. We'd have processions, we'd have all these things. And so I created a very similar song, almost in nature. It's called Magnificat, which means it's the first word from, in Latin, for my soul magnifies the Lord, from Mary's song taken from the Gospel of Luke. And so the words are Magnificat animum, so my soul magnifies the Lord. And the people would sing that, and then I broke up that actual text from the Magnificat, from Mary's canticle, in just a short little pithy phrases again, and everybody would always come. It'd be a call and response kind of thing where I would sing the verses, or a cantor would sing the verses, very short, and the refrain would actually be longer than the verses. It's almost like a litany of sorts, and it allows people to come right back to singing it, and accompanies processions really well. So that might be another song. The other thing is I think some of these songs that you mentioned, for instance, Pan de Vida, includes this, by Bob Hurt, includes this code switching where you sing part of it in English, you sing part of it in Spanish. And it becomes, in the end, once you learn it, I think it works well. But initially, when people come in cold, if it's not part of your repertoire, it's difficult to learn. And so there are songs like you mentioned, Pescador, You Have Come to the Seashore. And to allow people to sing it in their own native tongue, for instance, in Spanish, in the Spanish Mass, in English, in the English Mass, and then when you come together, you have, well, everybody knows the same song. Okay, how do we make it so that everybody participates? Another song that's very similar that I would recommend like that is, that's also in Floricanto, a very well-known song. 2 words, and the refrain is, in the English version, is also just in Spanish, but you can sing, everybody can sing just 2 words. It's not that big a deal. So I don't know if that makes sense. That's where I start.
It does.
And the other thing is I tend to look at songs that will create opportunities to participate easily while you wait to create a common repertoire. So one of the things I absolutely like to use, and I hope this is not an issue, but with, at least not with my colleagues here at OCP, but it's a song that's written by a friend of mine who is an African-American priest, originally from San Diego, Father Ray East, who works in the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. But what it incorporates, and I've used it over the years, it's a response to the prayers of the faithful. Oh, Lord, hear our prayer. And you can do it in Spanish, too. And what you do after that is everybody just hums on the last note that they ended up. And you can do it in harmonies, and then whoever is leading the prayer will say, for the church, and just chant that little response, and everybody's humming underneath. And so the people, in fact, become then the accompaniment themselves. And you have all these people, a church full of people humming, and it's just incredible. And there's harmonies that are there, the choir supports them, but you have this, the essence of the prayer is this, ritually is that it becomes the general intercessions, and everybody lifts their voice, their whole being in prayer. Very effective. I think he was genius in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We have a question here regarding the Exalted that you wrote, the Easter Proclamation. Can you talk about that? How did you come up with that?
Well, this was at another parish that I was at, that we actually had about 75% Filipino community, and we had begun a Spanish Mass. Obviously, the main language was English there, and we had at the parish a very wonderful celebration and custom of celebrating the Triduum really nicely. And there was some very talented cantors and musicians. And so the whole idea of being able to involve various cantors in the singing of the proclamation, and the deacon who loved to sing but wasn't particularly thrilled with the Gregorian chant melody that came from the Roman Missal. But he was willing to work on things. So what I did was I took the front and back end of the melody from the Roman Missal, and then just created little chant phrases throughout for the rest of the text. And then I created a part for the people to sing as an acclamation. And in this instance this is the night. And in Spanish, and I'm trying to remember what the Filipino phrase was. I can't remember what it was, but it originally was in three languages. And so that's how we used to do it at the parish.
But
people would sing in all three languages.
Right? Okay. But do you have OCP publishing the Filipino language? I see.
No, it came out just as and I don't know why we didn't. Maybe I should think of that. Maybe that's something to come in the future, but that's the way we did it at the parish. Oh, I know what happened. We created here at OCP, we were looking at creating a bilingual resource for the Triduum, for Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and the Easter Vigil. And so it was just in Spanish and English. And so I said, well, I have this thing here. And that's how it ended up being. And maybe it's something to revisit in the future. How do we create then this multilingual refrain?
Okay. If you was a music director taking over a choir, what advice do you give them in a Spanish Mass? What advice will you actually give them when they actually take over? And not a trick question, but just think about if it's a brand new group or maybe an established group and you're coming in as a director, what things the three things come to mind what you would do if you step in that type of situation?
Well, I'm assuming that they have had a history at the parish. And I would like to find what is a parish repertoire? What do they sing well? And start there. The other thing is as I gather the folks that are going to be part of the music ministry, to kind of make them feel comfortable with me as the quote unquote director. If I'm charged with leading people's prayer, to ensure that we're able to pray together as a choir or as an ensemble. And so to use the songs themselves that I'll be part of the repertoire as a prayer, and to kind of reflect on how we can sing in unison and how we can harmonize, how we can interact together and have meals together. So I think those things are important. How do we form community as a small group within the larger community? And this notion of understanding what our service is to be to the rest of the people is to lead the people in sung prayer and also to embellish the sung prayer.
Okay.
So for me, it's understanding this ministerial call to serve. And the other part is to be able to know the songs well enough to pray ourselves so that we're able to lead the community in prayer. I think that's essential. And I know that's a process, and it slowly but surely it deepens. And if we can grab that part, at least for me, I'm more important. Obviously, the musical end is important, being able to sing well, and eventually being able to, if there's music readers, to be able to allow them to gain that skill and knowledge as well.
If there is a song that speaks to the heart of the people that you would like to leave us with, what song will that be?
Well, I think,
of course, that you wrote.
that I wrote. I am. Because it doesn't come from a liturgical text or something like that. Something that I wrote, and sure. I don't know if you have that up, but it's called Amanecer, and it's only because it's a song of praise. The text itself, and it's a song of praise that comes from the very heart of my experience, but it's something that communally we can enter into, something that we sing as we rise in the morning. The Amanecer is at the break of dawn, at the dawning, and it's originally, as I wrote it, it was just an a cappella thing with this drum in the background, like a heartbeat. And so sometimes when we wake up in the morning, the very first thing you're conscious of is your breathing and your heart beating. And so within that environment that one has created for oneself, and as a person of prayer, that we say, thank God I'm awake. Thank God for this new day. Thank God for my work. I offer it all to you. I offer my life, my very life to you. So, and it's, I would say I'm proud, but I'm humbled by that particular song, and I'm grateful that I was able to compose that. And so much so that someone at one point in time asked me, do you have an English version? And I eventually created an English version of it. But and interestingly enough, it was the title cut of a song for which I was nominated for an album for which I was nominated for a Grammy many years ago.
Wow, that's powerful. I guess to leave us with today about who that represents your music and who you are, what do you would like to leave us with regarding you and your ministry?
Regarding me and my ministry, I take to heart how I am and we all are imperfect, and we are on this journey to holiness, and that I am grateful to have been given gifts to be able to share with people, but also gifts that allow me to enter into this mystery of who I am as a creation of, and who depends incredibly so on God, but also on the people, many people that surround me, that form this body of Christ, that continues to form me and transform me. And so this journey of life is filled with opportunities to have encounters with the living God, and music plays a big role in that. And so the more we strive to enter into a communion with God in spending time in silence, spending time in prayer, spending time praying with other people and leading other people in prayer, listening to people's stories, sharing my own story, and in light of the Gospels, this fits with in the grand scheme of things with who we are as church, and the same gospel that Christ lived among us and proclaimed, and we continue to proclaim in so many different ways to so many different people. And if we can use our skills and our talents, especially the gift of faith, if we can use that to make this world a better place, to proclaim good news by the way that we live, and in my case, that it includes music. And I guess I use music as a tool more than anything else because it's a gift. I think my gift is praying with others, and secondarily is the music, that I'm using it as a tool, and so then I can freely give it. I can freely understand my role in the community is not to be the musician, but to be the leader of prayer. And in this instance, it's a leader of sung prayer. So I don't know if any of that makes sense, but I take it very personally. My ultimate goal is, I remember a very good friend of mine who's now Kamal Dali's monk. When I first met him, I was his bass player going on tour to Texas, and we were doing youth rallies and such. And when we first got on our very first tour, we talked about, we were having a discussion sharing our lives, and he told me, he said, my goal in life, what I want to be, my desire is to be holy. And I looked at him, I said, that's my greatest desire, is to be holy. I'm a long ways from it, but if I can keep that in front of me, then hopefully in the end, when that end comes, there'll be lots of folks that hopefully will have made that their desire as well.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate you coming to the program. Thank you so much, Pedro.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Again, this has been the production of the Core Business Show with Tim Jacquet. You can download this episode on iTunes or Blog Talk Radio. Everybody, have a great day and take care.
Thank you for listening to the Core Business Show with Tim Jacquet. For a free quote on equipment leasing and financing, visit our website, applecapitalgroup.com. That's applecapitalgroup.com. And fill out the information to receive your free quote. We hope you'll join us for our next episode. And remember, you can always get to the Core via iTunes. You'll find all our previous episodes there. Thanks again for listening to the Core Business Show with Tim Jacquet.